On a quiet hillside in Brazil, two men lay lifeless, side by side, as if asleep. They wore matching formal suits, neatly pressed, and waterproof coats. But the detail that turned a strange scene into a haunting one was this: each man's eyes were covered with thick, handmade lead masks. Not surgical, not symbolic, but cold, metallic shields molded to fit tightly over their eyes. There were no signs of a struggle. No blood. No visible injuries. No weapons. Just two bodies, at peace, and a scattering of curious items nearby: a half-empty water bottle, two wet towels, and a notebook with a cryptic message that still baffles investigators to this day. The authorities were left with more questions than answers. Who were these men? What were they doing here? And perhaps most importantly, why the lead masks? It all began on August 20th, 1966, when a young boy set out to fly his kite on Vintém Hill, overlooking the coastal city of Niterói, near Rio de Janeiro. Searching for the perfect breeze, he wandered off the path, and stumbled onto a nightmare. In the tall grass lay two men, side by side, motionless. Frightened, the boy ran home and told his father, who quickly alerted the police. When officers arrived, they found the scene just as the boy had described: eerily calm, yet deeply unsettling. The men were later identified as Manoel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel José Viana, two electronic technicians from the nearby town of Campos dos Goitacazes, over 150 kilometers away. They had checked into town just days earlier, telling their families they were on a business trip to purchase work supplies. What stunned investigators was not just their formal attire, but the lead masks, clumsily cut pieces of thick metal, the kind used to shield against radiation. They were shaped like sunglasses, but heavy and expressionless, covering only the eyes. Nearby lay a few inexplicable objects: a plastic bottle that had once held water, two damp towels, and a small, dog-eared notebook. In it, a line stood out like something from a Cold War spy thriller. Be at the agreed place at 4:30. Take capsules after the effect. Protect metals. Await signal. The cryptic note raised more questions than it answered. Capsules. What effect? What signal were they waiting for, and from whom? With no signs of trauma, robbery, or foul play, the mystery deepened. Were they the victims of a failed experiment? Members of a secret cult? Or was this the tragic ending of two men who had stumbled into something far beyond their understanding? Whatever the truth, the mystery of the lead masks had just begun, and it was about to get even stranger. The two men discovered on Vintém Hill were soon identified as Manoel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel José Viana, both in their early 30s, both respected electronic technicians from the small Brazilian town of Campos dos Goitacazes, nearly 270 kilometers, 170 miles, away. To friends and family, they were quiet and reliable. Devoted to their work, humble in their routines. But beneath the surface, they shared an unusual passion, a fascination with the occult, scientific spiritualism, and fringe theories about energy, light, and interdimensional contact. They were members of a local group that believed it was possible to communicate with spirits using radio frequencies and bursts of light, a concept that mixed pseudoscience with mysticism. They weren't thrill seekers or known troublemakers. In fact, they didn't drink, didn't smoke, and rarely went out. But their deep belief in metaphysical experiments, especially those involving radiation, light phenomena, and spiritual ascension, hinted at something far more complex than anyone realized. On August 17, 1966, Manoel and Miguel left home under the pretense of buying materials for work. They carried with them a substantial amount of cash, several personal items, lead masks, and their best formal clothes, all neatly packed, they never explained the purpose of the trip. Their first stop was in Niteroi, where they arrived by bus. The trail from there becomes a sequence of strange and disjointed choices. A store clerk remembered them coming in to buy 2 waterproof coats and a bottle of water. Miguel appeared tense, glancing at his watch repeatedly, as if they were on a tight schedule. The pair barely spoke, paid in cash, and left quickly. Later that day, locals saw the 2 men climbing Vintém Hill. Witnesses described them as serious, almost ceremonial, as if following a ritual or responding to a silent summons. They were never seen alive again. When police retraced their steps, they found the receipt for the water bottle, timestamped just hours before the estimated time of death. The notebook they left behind mentioned a very specific time: be at the place at 4:30. Take capsules after the effect, await signal. Toxicology tests were inconclusive, partly due to the advanced state of decomposition and poor storage of the bodies during the early investigation. But many now believe that the capsules referenced could have contained barbiturates, psychedelics, or even a homemade sedative intended to induce a trance or spiritual state. There is also speculation they may have been following instructions from a guide or cult figure they trusted. Why the lead masks? Some theorize they believed exposure to blinding spiritual light or cosmic radiation required shielding, a belief that appears in some fringe spiritualist texts from the 1960s. Others suggest they were attempting to witness a UFO encounter or transcend into another dimension, and the masks were a misguided form of protection. In just 3 days, these ordinary men had transformed into the tragic center of one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in Brazil's history. A meticulously planned journey, ending in silence, confusion, and eternal speculation. Everything about the scene felt deliberately staged, even ritualistic. Yet no fingerprints, no footprints, and no eyewitnesses could offer clarity. The most baffling piece of evidence remained the notebook, which contained that chilling, cryptic instruction: be at the agreed place at 4:30. Take capsules after the effect. Protect metals. Await signal. To investigators, this message seemed to point toward a self-induced experience, possibly involving psychoactive substances. Perhaps the men believed they were on the verge of a spiritual encounter or a cosmic awakening. But no pills, capsules, or containers were ever recovered from the scene. Had someone taken them? Had they simply disappeared? The mystery deepened during the autopsy. By the time a medical examiner analyzed the bodies, they had decomposed significantly, due to exposure and an unfortunate delay in proper forensic procedures. As a result, any toxicological analysis was rendered ineffective. The final report listed the cause of death as unknown. No signs of injury. No illness. No trauma. Just 2 healthy men, mysteriously dead. With the investigation stalled, speculation filled the void. Some believed Manoel and Miguel were members of a secret spiritualist sect, perhaps attempting a form of astral projection or metaphysical travel. In the 1960s, Brazil had a growing underground of scientific spiritualism, a movement that tried to merge physics, mysticism, and the paranormal. The masks, they suggested, might have been a way to shield their eyes from an expected blast of radiant energy, or a divine light meant to accompany their transition to a higher plane. Others believed the men had been attempting to contact extraterrestrial life. At the time, Brazil, like much of the world, was swept up in a wave of UFO sightings and cosmic paranoia. The idea that the lead masks were intended to protect them from radiation emitted by a spacecraft or alien energy being took hold. In fact, earlier that same year, a wave of unexplained aerial phenomena had been reported in the region. A more sinister theory suggests they were deceived, possibly by a third party posing as a spiritual authority. Someone who may have convinced them to ingest a toxic substance with promises of enlightenment, knowing it would lead to their deaths. This could explain the precise timeline, the note, and the absence of any capsules. Others pushed the envelope further, pointing to the possibility of government experiments, mind control trials, or even time travel. These fringe ideas emerged as Brazil, like many nations during the Cold War, was entangled in covert military and scientific operations, some involving psychological manipulation, but in the end, every theory faced the same problem: no proof. The investigation was eventually closed, leaving behind more questions than answers. The lead masks, the bizarre instructions, the missing capsules, they all point to something profoundly unusual. Something that science, logic, and reason still cannot explain. Nearly 6 decades later, the deaths of Manoel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel José Viana remain one of the most disturbing and unsolved mysteries in Brazil's modern history, a case with no clear motive, no proven cause, and no end. In the decades that followed, the lead masks case grew beyond a local tragedy. It became one of Brazil's most enduring unsolved mysteries, a haunting story retold in newspapers, true crime documentaries, paranormal books, and late-night radio shows. But no matter how many times it was revisited, the conclusion remained the same: no answers. Only speculation. The haunting image of 2 men in formal suits and lead masks, lying lifeless on a remote hilltop, etched itself into Brazil's cultural consciousness, a chilling symbol of how reality can be stranger than fiction. In a country where spiritualism and mysticism run deep, some saw the incident as validation of beliefs that go beyond the physical world, proof, perhaps, that unseen forces are not just stories but something real. Brazil has long been a spiritual crossroads, where Catholicism mixes with Afro-Brazilian religions like Umbanda and Candomblé, and where tales of visions, spirits, and out-of-body experiences are not uncommon. Within that cultural framework, many viewed the lead masks case not as madness, but as a failed spiritual experiment. Others, more skeptical, pursued a scientific lens. Psychologists and historians tried to make sense of the behavior. Perhaps it was a case of shared delusion, or folie à deux, a rare psychological condition where 2 people feed each other's beliefs to the point of tragedy. Some linked the event to the broader context of the 1960s, a time of Cold War paranoia, experimental drug use, fringe science, and apocalyptic prophecy, but no matter the theory, no one could tie every loose thread. The cryptic note. The missing capsules. The masks. The cause of death. All of it remained just out of reach. Even now, more than half a century later, the lead masks case continues to fascinate and disturb. Internet forums dissect it. YouTube channels resurrect it. Amateur sleuths analyze every word in the notebook, every timeline, every detail, hoping to find the one overlooked clue that might finally unlock the truth. But time is not kind to mysteries. With every passing year, memories fade, evidence vanishes, and witnesses disappear. The hill is still there, but the answers may have died with Manoel and Miguel. What truly happened on Vintém Hill remains unknown. Were they attempting to transcend the physical world? Were they deceived by someone they trusted? Or were they chasing something that was never real to begin with? In the end, their story is a reminder that even in an age of science and reason, the world is still filled with shadows. That some mysteries, no matter how deeply we dig, refuse to give up their secrets. 2 men set out seeking something extraordinary. Instead, they became a cautionary tale and an enduring riddle, one final question, lying silent beneath the sky.